Well, thank you for joining us. We're meeting with representatives of Vancouver Energy. Would like to welcome Jared Larrabee, General Manager of Vancouver Energy, Dan Riley, Vice President of Tesoro. Do I have that correct?
It's, West Coast State Government Public Affairs is my exact title.
Okay, great. Well, we want to be accurate on that. And Lou, I'm sorry. Thank you. Let's see. We are here to talk about the proposed oil terminal at the Port of Vancouver. As Lou mentioned before the meeting, we apologize. A couple of our editorial board members are out of town. And so you're stuck with Lou and myself. I'm Greg James, just for purpose of introduction. I'm the editorial page editor here at the Columbian. And I would also like to introduce Aaron Corbin, a reporter, is sitting in on this meeting. He will not be asking questions in this forum, but I'm sure you've spoken with him in the past,
Yep.
and you will again. So anyway, gentlemen, tell us about the oil terminal.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, appreciate the opportunity
Sure.
to be here and to talk with you about it. It's been in the news a fair amount, so generally I think it's pretty well known what it is. And maybe just to give a background, I've been here for about a year working on the project. I've worked on it actually since the start, but was not located out here before that.
Where were you previously?
I was in Salt Lake City,
Okay.
Utah before that. So, and we've actually built and operate a number of these facilities around the country. Two of them actually in northern Washington as well. And I've actually seen firsthand some of the economic development and benefits that these types of terminals bring to an area like this. And so I'm excited about that. I've seen how the jobs actually can make a difference. The terminal is designed to handle 4 trains a day, or up to 360,000 barrels a day. And when we've been out in the community talking with folks, we certainly know that there's people across the spectrum of how they feel about this. But when we've met with folks, some of the key things that we've heard from them, those who are excited about it, are the jobs and economic benefit that it would bring, the fact that the trains are coming through today, and really making sure that that economic benefit from those stay here in this area, and then the energy independence benefits that it brings to the area. So we think there's a lot of positives from that perspective, and from how it can impact the economy and the community here.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I had I guess from our perspective, I consider this project to be a bridge to the energy future. Many people have opinions on where we're going long term with our energy needs, but today we are still very dependent on fossil fuel. We're seeing greater penetration of alternative fuels, and certainly fuel economy is improving, and that affects demand. But for the foreseeable future, we're still dependent on fossil fuel. What we've seen happen in the past few years is the rapid increase in production of crude oil from primarily from North Dakota. It's over 1 million barrels a day, and at the same time, what we're seeing is rapid decline in crude oil from Alaska. At peak, Alaska was over 2 million barrels a day of production. Primarily, that all came to the West Coast, or it did all come to the West Coast. So as production in North Dakota or in Alaska decreases, we're forced to go further to foreign locations, foreign sources to get crude to our facilities. Tesoro has refineries in Alaska, Washington, Anacortes, the Bay Area, and Northern California, and we have 2 that we're combining in one into Southern California. So what this allows us to do, if we build it out, is we can actually reduce foreign imports by about 30%. I also think that it fits into what I've heard the governor say is his agenda. He wants to invest in infrastructure, roads, airports, and he wants jobs. So I think that this all fits into what he wants to accomplish, and so that's a positive thing. Rail safety is key to all this. We acknowledge that. For our own part, if I speak to that for a minute, as we think about the design of the facility, it's really a pretty simple facility. It's 6 tanks, rail offloading facility and the marine wharf. But we're able to design safety into it so that we can handle crude oil in a very safe manner. We also, when it comes to the rail car, we committed last February. We heard the concerns about rail safety, so we committed to only allow the newer design cars, called the CPC 1232, to call on our facility in Anacortes. We have a crude offloading facility in Anacortes. And we have also committed that only the newer design cars would be used here in Vancouver. Also, there's a lot of work that's going on in that rail safety space. The federal government is working on the design of new cars. When we know what that design is, we will move toward that. In fact, just in the paper today, Patty Murray has put out a piece that's on a bill urging DOT to speed up the rulemaking on those rail cars. That's a positive thing. And last is just this week, state of North Dakota came out with a policy, the Oil and Gas Division, where they're going to limit or reduce the vapor pressure of crude oil that moves out of the state. So we're seeing that that particular commodity the vapor pressure is going to be reduced, which is a positive thing.
Let's start with jobs here. I think proponents say that would be one of the major benefits with having the terminal in town. A year ago, Representative of Savage said that at its peak, the facility would have 110 full-time jobs. Mm-hmm. And now you are claiming more than 1,000 full-time jobs would result from this oil terminal. Yeah. Why the discrepancy?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. So, and I think it warrants maybe going back and looking at what has happened in that point in time. So we started that, I think that was over a year ago when that statement was made. And at that point in time, we were in the early phases of design and construction and looking at the operations. So that's one element of it, is what has happened in that point in time. Now, the number that correlates to is what we've been saying is the direct on-site jobs. And as we've revised and relooked at the operation, we've said that number would go from 110 to 176 at full build-out. And so that number is in there. What happened also in the meantime, part of the FSEC process, or the permitting process we're going through, which is the Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council, is that we need to look at the economic impacts of the project. So that's where there was an independent economic analysis that was done by the analysis group. Through that analysis and what they've looked at, they took that 176 jobs that we indicated. They looked at the overall economic benefit and how it runs through the economy. And based on that, their estimate was that the direct, the indirect, and the induced jobs was over 1,000 jobs would be supported on an annual basis. So that's not incremental adding to 1,000
for our purposes,
supported.
Right, and I can understand that, but where would the other jobs be?
They would be in the services support sector tied to that. It would
Here
be
in Vancouver?
As far as where they're located. Yeah, those would be in the region. I'll come back to the FSEC process again. The analysis that's required through FSEC is to look at a 10-county region surrounding where the terminal is proposed. Now, that 10-county region is set up that way based on how I understand it, because that's approximately a 60-minute commute away from the facility. So it's where would someone typically commute for a job into the area. So yes, it is in this region and in this area. That doesn't include any of the economic benefits that would be attributed to, for example, the West Coast refineries from their benefit of receiving this crude in there. I actually think it's probably worth just mentioning the overall FSEC process as well. That's a very robust and thorough process. It's a very transparent process through there, and it has a number of things that are required that you do as you go throughout that process. So that economic analysis was a piece of that. There were a number of other things that were a piece of that, including the environmental impact statement and all the data that goes into that and related to that. But one of the great things about the process is we've submitted our information. All that information has to be independently evaluated and validated by FSEC staff and their consultants as they look at that. So we expect that'll happen, and that'll go through that process. And if there's questions about that, then there'll be an opportunity to discuss that and assess the accuracy of that as well.
Let me ask
Yeah.
a bit of a philosophical question. Might be debatable about the number of people that are opposed to this proposal, but not debatable that there is clearly strong opposition to the proposal. Why do you think that is?
Well, undeniably, as I said, I think there are two primary things that I see. Some people, because of their environmental values, are want to believe in the end of oil. They want to see us wean off of fossil fuel, and that's why I go back to say, this is a bridge to the energy future. We can't. Sometime, there's going to be technology breakthroughs, and we'll see a change. But for the foreseeable future, we still are dependent. Basically, our whole transportation system and so many of the things that we manufacture dependent on it. The second, undeniably, is the rail safety issue, and people are concerned about crude oil moving through communities, and that's why what we see happening is significant work being done in that area. We're in the process of redesigning the container, so we're going to make it safer. The railroad is, I know you've spoken with them, but they have significant investment plans to improve the rail system. I am impressed with the technology they use. As we use technology, we get better. So I think that we can improve the rail system. It is improving.
Do you think that if, let's assume for the sake of this next question, that the rail safety issue is resolved, do you think that the opposition goes away or fades, or that the majority of people would then be in favor of this?
I think that it's going to take time to prove to the public that the system is safe. I think it goes away.
Okay.
Let's look at what happened in Valdez in 1989. There was significant outcry about transporting crude oil, and the marine transportation system improved, and we don't hear that today like we did in the early 90s. And I think the same thing will happen with crude oil.
Well, but isn't it fair to say that in Alaska, sure, they're known for salmon, but oil is king in Alaska, and the odds of Alaska mounting a continued opposition to their lifeblood, i.e. oil, seems pretty remote. However, here, that certainly is not the case.
No, but it is, because crude oil comes into the northern Washington refineries from Alaska or foreign sources. So Washington had a big stake in that.
Well, right, but you would concede that there's a different dynamic between Vancouver, Washington, and Alaska, because we are not known for oil here. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we recently did a story that said this is actually going to be the biggest oil terminal in the country. That's a pretty major dynamic to be known of. I don't know whether or not Vancouver is going to be putting that on their welcome to Vancouver signs, world's biggest oil terminal, but this is sort of a philosophical thing that I'm getting to. Do you really think that you're going to be able to win Vancouver over, or is it even necessary to win Vancouver over?
Do you mind if I kind of
Sure.
go back to the original question a little bit as well in addressing this? So one of the important pieces to this is that, as Dan pointed out, the Alaskan North Slope crude oil is in decline, and the West Coast as a whole relies on that for one of the sources to produce the fuels that we all rely on, right? I'm sure that we all came to work in vehicles that use fuel. The newspapers are delivered in vehicles that use that fuel to get the information out to the community. Our homes are heated by the same fuel. So we all rely to a significant amount on this. And as that source goes away, but we have this additional source in North America that we can use, or we can go use foreign sources. I think when coming back to the philosophical question of is this something that would be of value and that would be of benefit to the community? Yeah, I think there's certainly a value statement here related to this. When it comes to energy independence or to using this. Now, there really isn't, other than a terminal like this, a way to get this North American crude that's produced in the mid-continent of the U.S. over to the West Coast. So, again, maybe referring to the statement that this is one of the largest in the country. It is bigger than most of the other ones that are proposed in the country. Well, there's some that are right next to each other. That's one of the differences. Many of them are really close to each other. And if you add those that are close to each other, then this is comparable to some of those.
Otherwise, it's the biggest.
Otherwise, it'd be the biggest. Now, there's some benefits to that, actually. Some of the benefits are you can have a state-of-the-art system that is purpose-built to handle this product and this product alone. That's a huge benefit. You can centralize the accountability and the responsibility in the event that there was an issue with a couple of parties. That's a major benefit to the area. You can centralize any emergency response or spill capabilities that might be necessary rather than having them spread out all along the way. Across the state and across the Northwest, there's probably 8 or 9 facilities like this that are proposed. And you could either do a number of small facilities or you can centralize that to one facility that can handle the needs of the West Coast. That's part of what we did going into this, is say, well, what does the West Coast need? Let's propose a terminal that does that. Now let's go through that very open, transparent permitting process so everyone knows exactly what we're proposing and why.
But are you seeing the kind of opposition that you're seeing here in Vancouver? Are you seeing that in other places, or do you have some sort of scale someplace on the wall somewhere that shows, a degree of concern? Where are we, or are you seeing this everywhere, or not?
We track other projects. We don't have a scale. No, we're worried about our project because we think it's the right thing to do. There is opposition out there to other projects.
How does ours rank?
I don't that I can't answer that question. It's subjective to
maybe taking it down to a personal level. We have a terminal in North Dakota. That terminal in North Dakota is an origin point for some of this product, right? At that terminal, we employ almost 100 people. A number of those people come from this area because they were looking for jobs in the recession, couldn't find jobs, went out to that area, and are working there. We get requests constantly from people like that asking when is this project can be up because they want to come home to their families and where they're living. So there certainly is some opposition, but there are a large number of people that see the major economic benefit that something like this can bring. When I look at this, rail safety is probably the common theme that we're hearing across the country wherever projects like this are proposed. And addressing that is certainly on the priority list of the federal government, the state government, industry, regulators. Everyone is concerned about that and wants to make sure that thing is addressed. The benefits to the nation from an energy independence perspective, the benefits to specific economies, those are massive and those are huge. And we do see a lot of people in support from that perspective as well.
To add on to the philosophical bent of this, I'm having trouble seeing how you can paint this as a bridge to future energy. Is this not further entrenching our reliance upon oil? And admittedly, yes, we are relying upon it. I drove my car to get here. Yeah, we need that. But at what point do we start making a transition?
Well, that transition has to be gradual. And so the fundamental question that you have to think about is, are we better off using energy from a stable domestic source, or are we better off importing oil from Russia or the Middle East? So I think that we need as we think philosophically.
So if we don't build this terminal, then we won't take that oil out of the ground, and it won't end up in the United States.
It'll go someplace else.
Okay, so
it'll go
still
to what's landlocked now I mean,
Right.
so it's either going to go to the Gulf Coast or to the East Coast, but it won't necessarily.
So,
It will be more difficult to get it.
Nationally, not building this terminal will not increase our dependence upon foreign.
Sure, it will on the West Coast. If you can't get crude oil, North American crude oil, to the West Coast, we still have a base demand for transportation fuels. We need the raw material to keep our refineries full. Where do we get that from? Alaska North Slope is in decline, so we will have to go further to foreign sources. And sometimes we trade with countries that, on the natural, we'd rather not trade with. I mean, there are parts of the world that you really would just as soon not trade with. And there are countries that are not stable. From an energy independence standpoint, we're much better off using domestic crude than we are some of the foreign sources that we trade with.
Let me ask you a question about the oil coming out of the North Dakota area. My understanding is the way in which the oil is produced from North Dakota is essentially dependent on the economics, the oil pricing that basically allows it to become economically practical to pull the oil from North Dakota. We also are aware that oil prices appear to be very volatile.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm now hearing that the economics of the oil coming out of North Dakota might not be as viable as it was 6 months or a year ago, based on the decline of oil prices today. Is there any concern that this whole North Dakota thing could disappear, or at least be greatly reduced based on oil prices?
We've had that discussion internally, and no, we don't see North Dakota oil drying up. Now, some of the future investment may be impacted on price because that's going to impact development. But in terms of what's there, no, it's going to continue to flow to market. It's going to find its market. The other thing is that these markets do fluctuate. We may be contemporaries, so in somewhat in age. So over our lifetime, we've seen the price of oil go up and down. The winner right now is the consumer. Fuel prices are going down. Piece in the paper today about airfares going down. So it's not a bad thing. The consumer wins.
And maybe just to be clear, for this terminal in particular, for Vancouver Energy and what's here, the economics of this are still very solid. And the price of the oil isn't really what would dictate whether or not this project would be viable or not economically. It's right there, and both companies are strongly committed to it and see that there's still value in it, and that is not impacting or dictating the economics of this project.
Along those lines, in the agreement with the port, is there any guarantee saying that we will be here for the 15 years we will be operating this facility throughout that time? We will be at full employment throughout that time? What kind of guarantee do we have?
Well, so through the agreement with the port is a 10-year lease with
10
two
years,
5-year
sorry.
extensions on that.
Okay.
Coming back to your oil price question, actually, again, that's not all bad. It's a great win for the consumers, and it's also a great win when you look at, well, maybe it slows down the pace of production a little bit, but that isn't necessarily bad. That extends the life of things out there. So actually, to some extent, this actually makes that life of that project potentially much longer and much more valuable. Our belief is that this project has much longer than a 20-year life.
But what is the guarantee that it will be at full employment throughout that time?
So there really, to my knowledge, there isn't a guarantee that it'll be at full employment throughout that time. What I can say, though, is that the market trends and the market demand for this would indicate that it will be at full employment. We get requests constantly, actually, for when is the terminal going to be up and running, and can we start talking contractually
Yeah, but
about
that
it.
doesn't mean that you have to run it at full capacity.
It doesn't mean that we
because
need
people want to work there doesn't mean you
Oh,
hire
excuse
them.
me. I'm not talking about people wanting to work there. I'm talking about demands from the refiners, the end users of the product wanting to sign contracts that would put it into full employment through that time frame.
And that brings up another point. My understanding is currently it is against federal law for domestically produced oil to be exported.
That's correct.
There's a lot of talk about changing that law. If that law changes and we allow domestic oil to be exported, would the oil from here be exported to foreign countries?
It's Tesoro's intent, if you look at the capacity that we have on the West Coast, that we will source crude from that facility to our West Coast refineries.
Intent, but is that written into the contract? with
It's
the
not
port?
in the contract, but that's the business case behind doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Is we want to have access to stable domestic sources to source. We have to get raw material to those facilities, and the best way to do that is through this terminal. Again, if you look at where our facilities are located, we plan actually to move oil from Vancouver to our Kenai, Alaska refinery. It fits well in that refinery, so we'll source it to there, Anacortes, and then to our Northern and Southern California refineries. That's the intent behind it.
Let me ask a little bit about our proposed waterfront project here. You know this, but for the sake of perspective, we know that there is a massive waterfront project that is proposed. We also know that the spokesman for the waterfront project originally said that if this oil terminal is constructed, that their project was essentially on the eve of destruction. That they had no idea how this thing was going to go forward if you all were going to go forward. You fast forward to a few days ago, and the waterfront project suddenly announces that they have a contract with a hotel as they begin moving forward with this project, despite the fact that you still are a viable opportunity as an oil terminal. What's your take on all of this and this recent decision or announcement by the waterfront project that the hotel is alive and well?
Yeah. We think it's great, actually, that they got that, and think that announcement related to the hotel is phenomenal. So for the waterfront development for Graymore, that's a great move and a great piece there. The port has been a phenomenal engine and economic development resource for this community for a long time, over 100 years. The port's been one of those drivers of economic development. The port obviously believes in both projects and that both can proceed and coexist, and we see these actually working well together. I think it would be great to see a project like ours going forward, another one of those projects that supports that economic development within the port, and our employees have an opportunity to live downtown in those areas that are being revitalized, and having the wages and the jobs that would support them being able to do that. So we really do believe that both of these can coexist and can live in harmony, and actually that they can help each other to grow and develop and progress.
And can I add to that?
Of course.
Crude oil trains are coming through this community today, and will continue to come through this community. The 5 refineries in Washington State, all of those 5 refineries either have or are in the permit stage of permitting a crude by rail facility. So crude comes down and it makes a turn and it goes up the I-5 corridor. The other thing that is interesting to me is the port invested, and the numbers, significantly in their improvement project, in their loop track to attract commodity business. It's a commodity port. What that means to me is that trains are going to come by the waterfront development because the port is looking for commodities that they can use to do their business. Now, what's in that train may vary, but it's still a train. The speed the trains come through that area is going to be very slow because they're at their destination. So I've never quite understood completely that argument, because trains are going to go by that location.
So, I mean, do you think that the waterfront project was just blowing smoke?
I don't know.
You don't know. You don't have an opinion on that?
No, I don't. As Jared said, we wish him well.
Oh, Jared, do you have an opinion on that?
We think
Yeah.
the two can coexist.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to the FSEC process again.
Wait, there's a yes or no question.
So,
Do you think the waterfront project was blowing smoke?
well, I certainly don't think that that our project will have an impact on that project. I think that both of them can coexist, and that they will both be able to be developed and both be economic drivers for this community.
So I guess that's kind of an answer.
So Jared, as general manager of Vancouver Energy, you'll be based here in Vancouver?
Yeah, I live here now.
Okay. Will you be buying a condo at the new development?
Well, probably not, but more because I'm more of someone who likes to live a little bit outside of the city
Okay.
area. So,
Okay, it's just checking.
yep.
But and let's talk about oil trains going by. Yeah, they're going to come through here. And I realize you guys aren't the railroad company, but Tesoro has had some safety concerns recently. In 2010, I believe 7 people were killed at the refinery in Anacortes, and Tesoro was fined $2.39 million by state regulators for 39 willful and 5 serious violations of state workplace safety regulations. What changes has the company made since then? Why should we believe Tesoro's commitment to safety?
Well, first, that was a tragic day for Tesoro. I mean, we lost people in our Tesoro family, and we don't forget that. Our hearts go out to the families of those employees, and we think about them continuously. I'm glad you asked the question, because what came out of that was a tragic incident, but we did our own joint union company investigation into the incident. We learned things from that incident, and we've shared them. We've shared them with the industry because there was a very complicated causal factor. So we strive for continuous improvement. Regarding the fines, when you have an incident like that, people come in and they inspect and evaluate. In fact, that was the fine that was levied, but that's not the final fine. You referenced the number 39. 28 of those have been dismissed. So that's not the actual number. I'm proud of our safety culture. I think that we have the right attitude and systems in place. Safety for us starts at the top and it comes down. It's part of our culture. We were looking at our statistics, what the metrics that we use just recently, and we continue to improve in all areas. We realize that the public expects that we're going to responsibly handle every drop of raw material and finished product that we manufacture, and we're up to that task. We were evaluating the metrics, the velocity, the OSHA metrics, and Tesoro is about 50% better than the petroleum industry. Interestingly, the petroleum industry is about 5 times. The incident rate is about 5 times less than the newspaper industry. Now, that's not a slap at the newspaper industry, but what it highlights is the emphasis that our industry places and our company on safety. This is undeniably we handle hazardous materials, and so we have to continuously use the systems and train our people and do the inspections so that we can make sure that we strive to have an incident-free workplace.
So if I might,
I'm sorry. When there was an incident earlier this year at the Martinez, California plant, reports said that company officials prevented inspectors from entering the facility. Is that accurate?
No, that's not true. CSB did. We had what was actually a pretty minor incident. We did send people to the hospital to have them evaluated from burns. They were treated and released. CSB came in. It was unusual to have them come in on that kind of an incident, but we let them in. They had full access to our facility, and in fact did an inspection of the facility.
I'm sorry, Jared.
well, I think it's important to add that this is a terminal. It's not a refinery setting. So here in
Right.
Vancouver, that's a very different setting from one perspective. And both of us, this is a partnership here as well. And both of us take very seriously the evaluation of our partners. We've been doing business jointly or in partnership for over a decade as partners. And we're constantly looking at each other's safety record and making sure that there's still alignment there. So we have belief and confidence in each other and each other's safety record. There's actually been a Tesoro facility, a terminal that's much smaller, here in the Port of Vancouver for over 30 years that has had zero spills and zero injuries at that facility. That we think is a demonstration of that commitment to safety. Anacortes, their crude unloading facility up there, it's been up and running for just over 2 years. Savage has been operating that entire time. We've had zero spills and zero occurrences in those 2 years. So we believe there's actually a really strong safety story and safety message out there.
Let me ask a question about the FSEC process, of which Governor Inslee will have a final say on. Most of the time, folks have been looking at this from framing it from a standpoint of saying, he's either going to say yes or he's going to say no. Have you all looked at a plan B for Vancouver? And by that I mean, let's assume for the sake of argument that the governor doesn't say yes or no, but rather he falls somewhere in between a yes and a no, where he says, I don't like the presently proposed project, but I could buy into something else. Have you all looked at something else?
No, we really haven't looked at something else at this point in time. And I think that it comes back to a couple reasons here. The port's invested over $270 million in their rail infrastructure, which is a phenomenal investment in the community and in making sure that rail has an access point to the area. Part of that is the loop track that Dan alluded to, allowing for unit trains to be handled in an area like this. The other investment that's been made is the river deepening. Over the past decade or so, $150 million in deepening the river to allow for products. So when you look at the overall supply chain and what we're trying to do here, the Port of Vancouver is the closest deep water port on rail to get you from some of these mid-continent oil fields. So really, when you look at the economics and at the safety factor, you've got a very short transit on rail before getting it on water. You get it on water and you deliver it to the West Coast refinery. So it's the best place to do a project like this. Now, that said, if a project like this weren't to go forward, we believe that the crude oil would still be coming to the West Coast. You would just need a bunch of smaller facilities in order to do that.
I think this fits into the governor's agenda. I mean, I said earlier, what is, when I hear the governor speak, what do I hear him say? He talks about jobs. He talks about infrastructure. I think he's got it right when he says we need to have a safe rail system. And, from the comments we made earlier, we're working in that direction. And his other big agenda that he's passionate about is climate change. And this project, I think, fits inside that agenda. Building this facility and bringing crude through this terminal is not going to increase carbon emissions on the West Coast. We're going to refine what we refine, or the West Coast will, to meet transportation needs. In addition, there's a bit of a credit in that Bakken crude has a carbon intensity value that is about 25% less than the average crude that's refined in Washington State today. So some minor credits there, but there are credits because Bakken crude has a lower carbon.
So you believe Inslee is a yes on this then?
I think he has every reason to say yes. If he looks at what his values are, and he's a very valued person, I think he can get around this project.
Okay, but I want to just get back to my scenario before I let it go.
Yeah.
So now, again, maybe it's not going to happen, but so now there isn't a yes or a no, but Inslee in fact says, you know what, I've got another idea, and this thing can go forward if you do this, which essentially would mean, I'm assuming, that you would reduce the size of this thing and sort of back away a little bit. would you at that point say, okay, I'm done with Vancouver, or would you concede the point and say, let's back this thing down a little bit?
Yeah, that's something that we would have to look at that
We
point
haven't
in time.
contemplated.
I mean, we'd have to look at the economics, the change that would be proposed,
Would
a number of things. So
would you-
I don't know that we could comment and say,
But would you
yes or
concede
no at
that
this
it
point in time.
sounds a little strange that you wouldn't even have contemplated that at this point? I mean, I don't know. To me, a business that doesn't look at a scenario like that in advance, that doesn't add up to me. But you're saying no.
We haven't contemplated that.
Yeah.
well, so, and I think maybe to add a little bit more color to that, so, and I'm going to go back again to the FSEC process. The FSEC process has certain things that you go through along the way. The next threshold is the draft environmental impact statement and what would happen there. So, and all the, if there's impacts and mitigations that are being proposed in there. So what I would say is it's early in the process, and probably too early in the process to be saying that we've really looked in depth at any of those scenarios or anything that would be happening related to that. So if that were to come up at some point in time, we certainly would be looking at that and would be looking at in detail and whether or not it made sense at that point in time.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Not only from an economic perspective, there's a number of perspectives you'd have to look at there. One of those is actually, can you still do that project and do it in a safe and environmentally responsible way given the changes that are being proposed? So that's a key piece to it too. It's not just the economics, it's making sure that we still have confidence that we can do it safely and environmentally and still have the benefit there.
And the oil from the Bakken fields now, where's it going now? The oil that would eventually come here, where does it go now?
Well, so some of it is coming to the refineries in Washington today. A lot of it is looking for homes on the West Coast but not finding them yet, meaning there's no infrastructure to unload it or to transload it into a place where it could go today. A lot of that oil is going to the Gulf Coast today. And in fact, what's happened, the Gulf Coast has nearly eliminated or significantly reduced their imports of foreign sources of light sweet crude oil like the Bakken today, to where they almost don't import any, and the stuff they do is more on a contract basis. The East Coast is in a similar situation. I believe I read a report a few months ago that in the last 2 years, the East Coast, by building facilities like this, has reduced their demand or their need for foreign crude oil by 50%. That's a great story. That's in some of the areas and some of the refinery areas where they were frankly shutting down and shuttering them because there was no economic value for doing that, and they were looking to ship that refined product from other areas of the country. And now those are back up online running, employing people who had been unemployed. Great story for the country from a jobs perspective and from an energy independence perspective.
Do you have a view on oil pipelines?
They're expensive and they take a long time to build. It would be nice if there were pipelines to the West Coast, but we don't see it happening. What rail does is it gets you optionality, because you have the ability to, from a commercial standpoint, to source from multiple different locations.
Okay. And I think you had already mentioned this, but I just wanted to sort of confirm it. So if by chance the Vancouver oil terminal does not get built, you're saying that the oil moves other places, essentially maybe the Gulf Coast. Are there no alternative West Coast plans if the Vancouver facility doesn't get built?
Well, there are other projects that are being contemplated that are, in various stages of the
Are they
permit
public?
stage. Yeah.
Okay, so
There's a number of them out there. There's the ones that are in Grays Harbor that are proposed. There's the one in Claskenai that's operating today. There's a number of other proposals in addition to those that are out there for those facilities.
So is it possible if Vancouver doesn't happen that those proposals might increase in capacity, for example?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. So here's what I would say. We propose what we think the market needs
Yeah.
on the West Coast, and if a project like this doesn't go through, the demand or the need doesn't necessarily go away.
Right.
So yeah, I would say that there's a strong likelihood that there would either be more proposals or that those would have more pressure to go forward or potentially more pressure to increase. So
One thing that our project, because it goes through that rigorous FSEC process, it gets a lot more attention. It is a bigger facility, so there's more opportunity for the public to weigh in and be heard. A smaller project is going to go through certainly rigorous permitting, but not with the rigor that the FSEC process has.
Are you feeling this same kind of intensity in these other West Coast projects that you're feeling here?
We're not involved in those.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, the only one we have our facility in Anacortes. We
Okay.
built that as Jared said, it was operational 2 years ago.
Right.
But we don't have any other, Tesoro or Savage do not
okay.
have any other that we're involved in.
Gotcha.
You mentioned the opposition, and earlier you said that much of the opposition is driven by concern over rail safety. And if something goes wrong, if there's a derailment, if there's a catastrophe, who pays for the cleanup?
Want to do that? Sure. We have depends on where it is. So if it's along the rail route, BNSF is going to respond. In addition, we have equipment staged in Pasco. We own the pipeline system that connects the Salt Lake refineries to eastern Washington. So we have equipment in Pasco. We have equipment here. We've staged equipment in Wishram,
But you mean
Washington.
like cleanup equipment, firefighting
Yeah,
equipment? What's that?
cleanup equipment. So the railroad would respond, and then we would cascade in resources to respond as well if there was an incident. Downstream, we're members of what's called MSRC, Marine Spill Response Corporation, and Clean Rivers. So because we have a terminal here, and so there is equipment that is staged and ready, and we have to have response plans so that we would respond to a spill. The vessels that would carry crude oil also have to have their own response plans. So the two work in concert so that if you have an incident, you respond, and at the end of the day, we own the crude. So we'll sort out financial responsibility.
Greg, when
I'm
I
sorry,
hear
say
you,
you'll sort out financial
Well,
responsibility.
it depends on what the failure is, but a responsible party is named, and an incident would be cleaned up.
Greg, when you ask that question, what I hear is the question partly is, will the taxpayers pay for any of that? And no, that is not the case. Industry would address that and take care of that and make sure there was a response. That's part of the reason actually that we have actually pre-purchased emergency response equipment and have placed it up and down the river already today. We have some equipment that has never been on the river before today, that's state-of-the-art new equipment that we bought, and we've already trained some of these organizations that Dan referred to on the ability to use that equipment. We go through that training, and we're training them today.
I'm sorry, you say taxpayers would not pay for that. Is that under federal law? Is that state law? Is it spelled out in the agreement with the port? What guarantees are there?
Yeah, handling oil is not new in Washington State. A lot of the financial requirements came out of Open 90 and the spill regulations that came into effect post Exxon Valdez. We work closely with the Department of Ecology. We do spill drills. In fact, today what funds the Department of Ecology spill program is a barrel tax on crude oil that comes in across the dock. When those spill regulations were written in the early 90s, it wasn't envisioned that crude would be coming in by rail. Last year in the 2014 session, there was a bill that would take the barrel tax and extend it to rail. We supported that bill. I think that a robust spill program in Washington State is in everyone's best interest. So we expect that we know those there will be bills this session that will address the funding and other
And I'm
areas.
sorry, did you say what the result of the previous bill was?
It failed at the end of session, so it'll come back this year.
I forget what and just, I'm no expert on corporations or corporate law or how they're organized, but what was the purpose of creating Vancouver Energy, and what would, if there is some catastrophe, what would prevent Vancouver Energy from pulling out while Tesoro and Savage just go about their business in the rest of the country?
Do you mean as far as at this particular
Yes,
project?
pulling out of this location.
Well, so it's a joint venture, and so the purposes for having an independent company is because it's a joint venture. It's not one company or the other.
Right, but if
company,
it's an
so-
independent company, then where is Vancouver Energy's obligation to this community?
Oh, so the only operation of Vancouver Energy is this particular facility, which that's why the obligation to the community is tied directly to the project and what it is here today. So there is an obligation here tied to it being the operation that it is and the responsibilities that it has, Vancouver Energy as this independent corporation, to the operation and to the community and to the employees that we would employ there.
And would they have an obligation for cleanup if there were a spill or an explosion or
Yes.
a derail?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh,
Okay. Yes.
Closing?
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Sure.
You know, you've written a lot about this project. We understand your position and respect it. You know, our purpose for being here is to be open and transparent. We're honest. What you see is what you get, and we hope that some of the things that we've said have resonated and make sense. I do have a process question for you, though. I know that we see a lot of press and more of it is opposed to the project than in favor of it. What's the process that you go through with op-eds to try and strike a balance? And I think your readers, you have readers that are on both sides of this issue, and you seem to be more on one side of the fence than the other.
With the op-eds, and I've tried to make those balanced. I have run, and to answer your question, the process is I'm in charge of the opinion page. And so I consider op-ed pieces and decide what to run. And we have room for 4 opinion pieces every Sunday on our op-ed page. And we have run several in support of the terminal, and we will continue to do so. I believe and I'm sorry, I don't recall exactly who we've published and who we haven't. I believe, Jared, I think we ran an opinion piece from you. And we consider those as they come in. When we received one recently, at that point in time, we had, a short time before that, we had run an op-ed in favor of the proposal, and I didn't think we needed another one at that point in time. But we will continue to consider both sides of the issue for the op-ed page.
Yeah, and a general answer to your question is, obviously from our opinion standpoint, is our opinion, and there's not necessarily should we write an editorial in favor of it, and should we write an editorial opposed to it. From an op-ed standpoint, our goal would be to try to give access to both sides of any issue. Do we have a scorecard somewhere, that says, okay, we've got X amount of these and X amount of these? Well, there's no scorecard, but we do generally try to balance op-ed pieces to make sure that both sides are covered.
And we just appreciate that balance.
Sure.
Again,
Same thing with letters to the editor, by the way. If you follow our letters to the editor, you will see a similar view from our standpoint that basically says, if we're getting, 20 letters opposed and 20 letters in favor, when all is said and done, can we make sure that we get about the same number of letters in favor of and opposed to? And so we have that same philosophy with letters as we do with op-ed pieces. Again, from an editorial standpoint, that's a different animal for obvious reasons. But certainly from letters and from op-ed pieces, we try to be as balanced as we can.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So really appreciate you guys letting us come
Well,
in
thank you
here
for joining
and talk
us.
about this. So,
Great.
I mean, I think it's important. One of the things we've had over 100 meetings in the community, and I think that it's important for us to make sure that the facts are out there related to the project. The majority of those meetings, it's really about telling people about the project and then about the FSEC process and how they can get involved. We think that's an important piece, that people know that the way that in the state of Washington we've set up the process to evaluate and to provide input into a project like this is through that FSEC process. And there are a phenomenal number of ways to provide input into that, whether it's a written letter or the public meetings or expert opinions. And we think that's good. We think that'll only make the project better in the end, and we think that that'll take into account all of the perspectives as we go through that. So we want to make sure people know about that process and know to use that process when they have an opinion or when they have expert facts that need to be heard in particular. So,
Great. Well,
Great.
thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Appreciate it.